were afforded some limits on their use of property, like private property as protections and limits in the modern day. And I would not classify that as human rights. I would say every type of slavery is evil and immoral, and there's no way to reform slavery except to abolish it.
Yeah, the definition you gave, I agree with that. Anybody is treated as less than humans, that's wrong. We agree on that. But I'm not talking about that slavery. You're talking about a slavery I'm not even referring to.
I think what I'm saying applies to biblical slavery.
I don't think it applies to the definition I gave from Colossians chapter 1, chapter 4, and 1 Corinthians chapter 7.
So we disagree that I don't believe any type of justice can be afforded to anyone whose condition is a slave. I don't think the people who sold themselves into slavery usually were coerced by debt payments, and these laws weren't enforceable.
Usually, but not all the time. There are exceptions to the rule. That's why it's a rule. But
do people today voluntarily sell themselves into slavery?
Yeah, I believe so. We have examples in history of people selling themselves into slavery because the alternative.
Sex trafficking is done under a person when they have like consensual rights. These people are groomed. Their rights are violated. That's my point.
I mean, you keep bringing up things that you and I agree with are wrong, but back to the foundational principle in your worldview. What grounds these moral principles being universal? Are you just saying that this is your opinion?
Humanism. Any type of slavery is abhorrent to me.
Okay, so is that just your preference?
No, it's a moral revulsion based on minimizing human suffering and the belief that every human deserves human rights and that no human should be property.
So it's based on minimizing human suffering, which is ultimately decided by human beings as to what human suffering is. It's preference.
I don't think emotions are necessarily preference. They can be a reflection. Your preference can be a reflection of your emotions, but I think emotions are more based on that.
Well, as an atheist, I think that you're probably a determinist, that you think that we're all determined by natural laws and natural effects, right?
I would lean more to like a consequentialist, but I wouldn't define myself as.
Wait, no, I'm talking about your foundational worldview going further down into the foundation, passing morality. Are you a naturalist in that you think everything is governed by natural laws and natural world is all that exists?
I don't think the natural world is in this dimension is the only thing that exists.
Okay. Let me be more specific.
Outside of the observable universe, we don't know what exists outside of the expanding universe, and we don't know yet what exists in other dimensions.
But thus far, you haven't seen any evidence of a supernatural, so your conclusion is that there is no supernatural, right?
Even if I believed in God, I would still be against slavery in all respects.
Well, we still haven't gotten to the grounding as to, I mean, the grounding moves every time I ask a further question. Because earlier you said that your morality is based upon reduction of human suffering. And then I asked, who decides what human suffering is? More people decide that. Okay, when they decide that, what is the metric that they use to decide what human suffering is and what isn't? You said trauma. And then you said earlier that the victim decides what is suffering and what isn't suffering. But you and I both know that somebody can decide that they're suffering from something, but they're not really suffering from something.
Yes, so I define suffering as empirical, negative, emotional, mental, economic effects where someone loses a certain type of stasis or equilibrium they were at before, where they are.
But there you go again. You just move the goalpost again in that now the victim isn't the one that decides it. You are the one who decides it. You see what's happening?
No, I'm giving agency to the victim, and this is how they define it.
So you're making the statement that this is how every victim defined.
No, I'm not saying every victim.
Okay. So you're not making a universal statement. You're saying that there are some victims who define suffering in that way and others who don't.
Well, yes, slave owners would tell you that slaves aren't suffering.
And since not all victims define suffering the same way, it is different among some people who are suffering, right?
Their emotions and experiences are different, yes.
So it's back to subjectivism. It's subjective.
To a certain degree. I don't think I would, anyone who says they enjoyed being a slave, I would regard them as a liar. if that's what you mean.
But the point I was making is that your worldview is ultimately subjective in that the victim decides what suffering is, and that definition of suffering can be different among the victims, which would resort your worldview back to subjectivism in that you wouldn't know who's right and who's wrong since everybody or maybe most people have a different definition of what suffering is. Somebody
I
could
think
say stubbing
the
their
Bible
toe.
itself is also subjective. There are many Christians who use Christianity and as the reason why. The first abolitionists talked about Jesus' moral works and how those oppose slavery. So I think
So is that a concession? Are you
subjective.
saying that your worldview is subjective and you're saying that mine is also subjective?
Yeah, there's a certain degree of subjectivity to the truth. I'm not an epistemological realist that
Okay.
believes there's no such thing as true facts. I
Okay.
think there's certain laws of the universe that we can agree as fundamental axioms, but I think when it comes to a lot of human behavior and culture, a lot of subjective things like experience can be aggregated into data that better reflects the experiences and the impacts of these on a larger scale.
And when the data is when experiences and these variables are aggregated into data, the data is then interpreted by people who have different perspectives and different opinions, right?
Yes.
And the data, because it's interpreted by different people with different opinions, different conclusions, you're back to subjectivism again. And so you're conceding that your worldview is subjective morally, and you're also saying that mine is subjective morally as well.
I would say so, because culture really does influence the moral views.
Okay, so when you look at philosophy and you look at divine command theory, which is what I subscribe to, you actually see a basis for objective morality. The only problem with my worldview is an epistemological problem where the Christian or the religious individual, Jew, Muslim, or Buddhist, or whatever they are, they have to give a basis for how they know that the revelation from their God is objectively true and is the correct one. But it still gives us a basis for objective morality. Are you aware of that?
But isn't objective morality supposed to solve every single moral dilemma?
Well, I wouldn't say that it is supposed to. I would say that it has the potential of doing that. And the reason why I wouldn't say it's supposed to is because people are different, and people are out there who are like you. They don't think that God exists. And because they don't think God exists, they don't think that the morality in the Bible is any different from a preference and a subjective opinion from other people. But since, I just got to point this out, conceptually and philosophically, when you look at divine command theory, the only problem in my worldview is whether or not I have a basis for knowing God's revelation and if he has revealed his law to us. That conversation would be with me and another religious individual, because
Yes.
I do think that God has revealed his law in his word. And conceptually, even if you don't believe in God, conceptually, in my worldview, I have an objective basis for saying that X or Y is wrong objectively, not just opinion.
I don't think that is objective because, as you said, you don't know which. Epistemologically, there's no way for you to know which.
No. I'm not saying that I have no way of knowing. I was just pointing out the philosophical literature on divine command theory. That is what they say the problem is. But I, as a Christian, would argue against that and say, I know what the law of God is because it has been revealed to me in his word. And that's what every other religious group would say. But that would be a conversation between different religions and debates between them. I could debate with a Muslim right now and show him why his morality is incorrect and mine is not incorrect. But
even
you're not
in
a
your
Muslim.
own denomination, in your own church, you can find someone who follows the same scriptures and Bible as you, listens to the same preacher, and will have a different moral opinion than you. How does that not demonstrate that morality is subjective?
Actually, that is not true in all cases, because
no, I'm not saying people don't agree with you. I'm saying there are people who don't agree with you.
No, let me tell you why. Let me tell you what I was referring to. There are certain denominations, and you just pointed some out, that are very subjective in that they will say the Bible teaches this and the Bible teaches that. But nowadays we have some churches who are for LGBTQ and so on and so forth, and some churches that are not for LGBTQ and so on and so forth. And both of those churches use the same Bible. Where is the demarcation? There is a certain kind of Christianity that does not believe that the Bible is like Russian roulette and you just open it and decide what you want to believe and what you don't want to believe. Certain Christians do that, but certain Christians don't. And the Christianity that I'm a part of is the one that subscribes to historic Christian creeds and historic Christian doctrine, and states and stipulates that if you are a Christian, you are obligated to believe all of these things because all of these things are definitional to the faith, which unifies us as a group, as Christians on my side over here. But the Christians over here, I can't even say that they are Christians, by the way, because there are things that they reject that are definitional for making you a Christian. An example would be if I say I am an atheist, but I believe in the Christian God and I believe in transcendental beings and I believe in a transcendental realm and a spiritual realm. I am not an atheist because definitionally an atheist is somebody who lacks belief in God or somebody who says God does not exist. So there are propositions and statements that define what something is and what something isn't. And there are people out here. There are people out here who are not Christians who are saying they are Christians.
Outside of human experience. I agree with that.
There are people out here who are saying they're Christians and are not Christians. So what I'm saying is that morality has been the same throughout the Christian church for thousands of years. Well,
That's
thousands of years. Not thousands of years. Hundreds of years. I can't say thousands because we've only been around for 2,000 years.
Vatican II is a very big reform.
Wait, say that again?
Vatican II is a huge reform that changes biblical attitudes towards many, many social, political, and economic aspects that were.
But I don't think that Roman Catholicism is true. It's an apostate. It fell away from the Christian church during the Middle Ages.
What denomination are you?
I'm Presbyterian.
Presbyterian. Okay. And what? Sorry, I'm not educated on every single Protestant denomination. What would separate you from like a Methodist like John Wesley, who says that slavery is immoral in all cases?
What would separate me from John Wesley? I mean, John Wesley's doctrine is based upon an Arminian theology that we all have free will and we are the final decider as to whether or not we are saved by God's grace and so on. And as it relates to slavery, I would have to have a conversation with John Wesley as to what he means by slavery. Because when we mention the word slavery, we generally mean what took place a few hundred years ago. And I am on the side of everybody who says that's wrong. What I'm defining is that as a Christian, every single one of us, when we call Jesus Christ Lord and we say Jesus Christ is Lord, we are submitting to him as his slaves of Christ, servants of Christ. You look at the Bible, you see this being repeated over and over again. Slaves of the Lord Jesus Christ, slaves of Christ, or bondservant. The Greek word is doulos. It means slave. So in Christianity, we are slaves of a human being who is Christ, the Lord, the God-man.
Okay, I understand that.
I would have to ask him what he means by slavery is wrong in all respects, because Christianity is a form of slavery to Christ. So I can't really take the quote that you gave and say, hey, he means he's against all kinds of slavery. Because the slavery I'm referring to is a relationship between a slave and a master where the slave master treats his slave with justice and fairness. So the slave has rights. The slave has protections. The slave has...
But the slave doesn't have a right to be human. That's my point. So my question is, would you want to see biblical slavery legalized?
He said the slave doesn't have a right to be human. Where in the definition I gave you did I stipulate that?
Well, the thing about slavery is that slaves are regarded as property and not human. That's the definition of slavery.
All right, let me give my concession again. When you look at slavery throughout the history of humanity, and including in the Roman culture, when you look at slavery in Rome back in the 1st and 2nd century, slaves were property and nothing more. That's wrong. That's deplorably wrong. But just because you are regarded as property in a culture and you're owned by someone in the culture, it does not necessitate that you will be treated as such. Because in your country, I think you're American, right? You're American?
Yes.
Dogs are treated better than a lot of humans in this world, in America. Dogs have rights. Dogs have insurance. Dogs are treated as members of the family, even
They don't
though.
have human rights.
Yeah, I'm
So
just
there are
using.
people who
I'm
want to avoid
using.
them that.
I'm drawing a similarity with a principle, and the principle is this: just because you own something or someone as your property does not necessitate that you will treat them as property. That's the principle I'm
No,
pointing out.
any way you treat them, once the definition of something is set in stone, any way you treat them until that definition is negated is subservient to that definition. It is downstream of that.
But the definition that you're giving is negating. You're negating the definition that the Bible gives because you say you don't believe the Bible, but you can't negate.
Biblical slavery defines slavery as property ownership, where you have to be a benevolent master in certain respects. That it's only regulating the activity and behavior of the master. It's not regulating the nature of the slavery. It's still human property. And
so that's what you mean. Okay, that's what you mean. I'm not
to legalize slavery.
I'm not against the definition you gave just now, and I'm going to ask your question. Am I for legalizing slavery? I'm going to answer that in a second. I agree with the definition you gave in that slavery is a human being owning another human being as property. I say that's not wrong because a human being can treat another human being, even though the human being is his property, like his equal, which is what takes place in Christian slavery. And that is why if I was in a culture where slavery was prevalent and I had no choice but to be a slave, I would want to be a slave of a Christian because I know that they would treat me with justice and fairness. Now, to your question, would I want slavery to be legalized? No, I wouldn't, because as a Christian, in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, we are given the preference from the Bible. If you are able to be free, rather do that. So if I have an option of having all human beings in the world be free from human slavery, rather do that. I want that instead of slavery because human beings are imperfect, human beings are sinful, and it is not a guarantee that they will always treat their slaves with justice and fairness. And when they fall short of that, that would be wrong. And slavery opens the possibility for one human being treating another human being as if they are property or less than property. But
so what
again,
you're saying
I have a grounding for that. You don't.
So what you're saying is slavery is a product of history and it was justified in the past, but it isn't justified today because we abolished it. So, but how do you get from saying slavery is okay to abolishing it?
No, I don't think that slavery was okay in the past. I think that slavery, every instance.
You're justifying biblical slavery.
Well, I'm trying to explain. Every instance of slavery where a human being mistreated another human being, and we have a lot of those examples from history. That's evil.
I think
that's
slavery
wrong.
itself is the mistreatment. That's my main contention here.
But your main contention again is based upon a subjective preference, not an objective moral.
No, it's based on the universal principle of human rights. I don't believe any human can be property, and such activity violates the universal rights of every single human being who exists and has ever existed.
So back to that, you said it's based upon the universal principle of human rights, which you said occurs and is derived from human beings. And you didn't answer the question of which human beings created that and why their creation became universal for all other human beings.
Well, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights had a lot of Christians, like I said, clerics like Abbesius, Robespierre, Danton. They opposed slavery based on these principles from different ideological and theological backgrounds.
And what kind of slavery were they opposing?
Both chattel and biblical slavery.
Both chattel and biblical slavery
that ever existed and can ever exist. The principle of slavery is what they oppose.
And where geographically did this document come from? France. So people in France who got the idea of universal human rights applied that universal human right to all other human beings, and hence it became universal.
No, the idea existed before the practice existed, and they actually didn't manage to abolish slavery everywhere in their colonies.
So don't you see the problem? You're saying that something is universal, but you're also saying that it came
No, there's a
from.
separation between theory and praxis. Something can be true and right, but it might not actually have a relevance to the real world.
Okay, so back to the question. What is the grounding for that true and right universal principle that was recognized by the people in France? What's the grounding for it?
Consent.
Okay, so you realize what's happening, Max. And every time I ask you,
But
what is
consent
the grounding?
a human right. No, I'm just naming universal principles because those are my fundamental axioms.
Okay,
I can't
okay.
go deeper than that.
Okay, what was the word? Damn, say the word again.
Fundamental axioms?
No, accent. Consent. Sorry, consent.
Consent.
So consent. So that's the axiom, right? Consent.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone consents to be a slave, is it right?
No, because I don't believe you
So
can
there you
consent
go.
you can't consent to violate your consent. That violates the principle of consent.
So you can't consent to violate your consent?
Yes, it's a contradiction.
So if a slave consent, like for example, if I consent to be a slave of a Christian, knowing that the Christian will treat me with justice and fairness, I am not consenting?
Yes, because you can't consent to a violation of your consent. It's a paradox. It's not possible. It's a contradiction because once you consent to a violation of consent, there's no more consent. Consent ends. There's no the premise of violating someone's consent means there's no consent. So you may say, "Oh, I consent to something," but there are a lot more explanations that are usually, I would say, materialistic or based on your class, your culture, your religion, your wealth, the way you grew up, your income, that may influence the decision. So these decisions aren't made in a vacuum.
So let me see if there's something behind consent. I asked you earlier, are you a naturalist? Do you think that everything we do is determined by natural effects?
No, we do violate, well, we can't violate the laws of nature, but we definitely destroy nature.
Oh, wait, let me try to make this different, make this more clear. When you say words, when you think, and when you act, are those the result of chemical reactions in your brain that are being operated on by laws of physics?
Yes, it is
Okay.
a product of chemicals, but it is also a product of the environment around you, which is the totality of human constructs is greater than the chemical reactions that underwent in the people who posited them. I think ideas can exist outside of like they can be independent of not humanity, but just the humans who thought of them because they exist longer than they die.
I think that your worldview, like what you just said, I think there's a problem there because you're saying that thoughts, words, and actions are the result of chemical reactions in your brain that are acted upon by laws of physics. And then you said that there are principles that exist independent and beyond the mind. How can you have both? How can you have both in that worldview?
Because you can make decisions under the influence of, say, certain drugs or mental illness where there are other factors at play than just the individuality of your chemical makeup. The totality of your decisions is greater than the sum of its chemical effects. That's what I mean.
I'm detecting
chemically far enough to define a personality in terms of chemicals. We can define emotions, the types of chemicals that make up emotions, but we can't really record the science. Like we can record types of emotions people feel, the intensity they feel, their testosterone levels, but we can't predict outcomes.
Of course, you can't predict outcomes, but if you are a naturalist and you actually think the proposition, everything we think, say, and do are the result of chemical reactions in our brain that are acted upon by laws of physics, then if you are consistent, then you would also say that these axioms that you made reference to and these principles of consent that you made reference to are all the result of chemical reactions in the brain of human beings that are acted upon by laws of physics, right?
But naturalism includes the environment. That's just my
Yeah, I
point.
mean, aren't the laws of physics from the environment, man?
Yes.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think
So
it's a dialectic.
you're not saying anything different from what I'm saying. I can even say the environment, laws of physics in the environment that act upon your brain, and your brain chemical reactions make you think, say, and do what you do, right?
Yes, but I'm saying the totality of that is greater than just the chemicals.
In my worldview, I can say that, but in your worldview, how can you say that it is not just chemical reactions being acted upon by laws of physics in your worldview?
Because people put in the same environment act differently. People in the same family who have the closest genetic makeup, who may experience the same environments, have different chemical reactions and have different decisions based on those chemical reactions.
And
Someone
you would
may experience the same chemical reaction, but then make a different decision than someone else.
But you and I
can't
would
explain
both.
that.
But you and I would
Yeah.
both agree that no two human beings have the same genetic makeup. None.
Yes.
So if you make the example you just made and say people in the same environment acted upon by the same same laws of physics, their chemical reactions are going to be different because it would be necessitated by their different genetic makeup and biological makeup, right?
Yes, but political equality stands above that.
What equality?
Political and social equality.
Oh,
like
political and social
slavery.
equality. Okay, so political and social equality that is defined and drawn with conclusions from cultures, people and cultures, are somehow not the result of chemical reactions in the brain of humans
No,
that are
I'm
acted upon by
saying they
physical
are,
laws.
but time is a factor here. Culture is a factor here. It's great. The environment is a factor here. It's
But
greater
those,
than
but
the
those
sum
would
of its
all
parts.
be the result of chemical reactions in the brain by physical laws, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so you're not saying anything different, man. And I'm not trying to bully you in any way, shape, or form. I'm just trying to hold you to your worldview. So in that
No, I'm saying
worldview,
they're a synthesis and they act in tandem to produce a product that involves both processes, and they're not necessarily distinct. They're just different aspects.
but in that worldview, though, in that worldview, everything you said earlier about consent and about axioms and about universal moral principles and all of that stuff is all resorted to chemical effects in the brain
It
from
can
the
be
laws
a
of
product.
physics. Yeah, those are okay. Let's say it. Let's say
But
that.
you can't just boil it down to that. I'm saying there are other factors.
But that is what I'm saying, though. I am saying that they are the result of those things in the brain by physical effects.
Well, okay, but that's different than saying chemical effects. My point is that all slavery is wrong, and if you justify slavery in the past, it means you justify slavery in the present.
And here's my point. In your worldview, everything you just said, including the proposition slavery is wrong or unjustifiable, was all made to happen by chemical reactions in your brain, just like every other human being in the world. So, in that respect, since chemical reactions and since physical laws are not personal entities, they are not personal beings, they are non-rational, non-logical, and non-conscious. How can
they are
those?
logical. There is a logical element that you can follow in these atheist philosophers. They just don't. The God is the premise.
No, I mean natural laws. They don't have the capacity of logical discourse. That's what I mean. So
No, they do. Math is the logical description of natural laws.
I'm talking about the capacity of reasoning. You and I are reasoning right now. Natural laws can't do that. That's what I mean. I guess. Sorry about that, man. Sorry. I guess I have to be more clear. In the future, when I say that, I'm going to make sure I say what I mean. Because
I just don't understand what you mean.
Okay, so what I'm getting at is your worldview has an inconsistency. Let me tell you what I mean. In your worldview, you have natural laws that are non-conscious and non-personal, producing instances of personality and consciousness in the universe, like you and I and other entities. And because of that, you're left with having to explain where those things came from and how non-conscious and non-rational physical laws can produce instances of rationality and consciousness without God. How does that happen?
I think they're rational. I think there is a consistency in opposing slavery in every single instance, at every single point in human history, past, present, or future.
But I can simply say that your brain is making you say that based upon the physical laws around you. Your brain is making you say that. And how can that even have any purpose and any meaning, since all you are right now is your brain making you say what you say?
Yeah, but your brain could also be making you say that God is real and that's why you believe everything.
But I'm not a naturalist, so I don't think. I'm not a naturalist, so I don't think that my brain is all that I am. That's what you think.
I know, I'm not saying my brain is all that I am, and that's not what naturalism is. Naturalism includes the environment.
Yeah, which is based upon physical laws, man, which we just said, we agreed to. So in your worldview, when you say slavery is wrong, objectively, what I'm hearing is that you're saying what the physical effects around you made you say, which means that you are determined to say what you say without meaning and purpose, because physical laws, physical effects, don't give you meaning and purpose in the world. Where does meaning and purpose come from in physical laws?
In physical laws, the meaning and purpose is the law itself.
So the meaning and the purpose of the law itself.
Intended effect.
So the meaning and the law is the purpose itself. Okay, so when different people do different things, such as some people owning slaves and some people committing atrocities, because they are ultimately determined by physical effects and physical laws, and these things are different among other people, are you saying that physical laws have different purposes with different people?
Experiences among different religions and different moral ethics, they're interpreted differently and they apply differently.
I don't think that answered the question, man.
They're not inherently metaphysical. They're based on shared human moral rights. That's the axiom itself is that certain moral rights are universal and applied to all humans. But you could argue.
But I don't think that you can get human rights. I don't think you can get human rights without the metaphysical grounding of God's transcendental law and transcendental being. And you said earlier that these people in France, they got that from the foundational principles of religious people, not atheism.
And atheists.
Atheists. Now we agreed that atheists were among the group who came up with that principle, but we also agreed that the atheists did not have a grounding. They depended upon the grounding of the Christians.
I don't agree with that. I believe the atheists and the deists had a grounding, because your argument is the religious people were the ones who didn't have the grounding because they say biblical slavery is wrong in all cases.
No, I'm saying that the grounding for slavery, and you said that they condemned biblical slavery as well. I'm sure they're not defining it the way I'm defining it. And you said they condemned the slavery of that time, which they should, because it was based upon the inhumane treatment of human beings. But what I'm pointing out is that in your worldview, and by the way, a deist, if you probably know, a deist is somebody who believes that God has not revealed himself to anyone. You know that, right?
And that God doesn't participate in the natural world.
Right. So a deist is a logical contradiction, because a deist will stipulate things about God, but also stipulate that God has not revealed himself to them at all. Now that's a contradiction. So I don't agree with the deists at all, because how can they say they know what God has stipulated to be right and wrong when they also stipulate that God has not revealed anything to them about himself and about his law?
Because some deists derive laws from human rights and universal moral principles rather than God.
But a deist...
And there's a disagreement among deists, so even deism itself is subjective.
Right, but I'm not a deist, though. So the deist...
No, I'm pointing out that because of this, religion itself is interpreted subjectively. There can be an objective position where you follow every single law, but no one does that. You're wearing mixed fabrics right now. That's a sin.
No, that's not a sin, man. You're misinterpreting that passage. I think you have to do more reading on that. Let me just jump back in again. You just said that deists are also subjective, which completely, I thought you were arguing for objectivity, but since you said deists are subjective.
I'm not arguing for objectivity. I think certain elements of truth are subjective.
I think my argument is vindicated then, because if you are... Wait a minute.
Truth is descriptive. Happening. It's not prescriptive.
Wait. Okay. I think I'm vindicated because if you're saying that the deists, just like the atheists, who are among the group of people who said
And
that
religious people.
universal, we can get to that in a moment. If you're saying that universal moral principles were the ideas of these people in France, and the deists and the atheists who are among that group are all subjective in their moral principles and morality, that you just contradicted your whole worldview when you say that they brought about
the contradiction
universal
here is that the
principles.
subjective moral view can hold objective axiomatic principles. It's just underlying them. You don't have any explanation for that past the principles that you posit.
Okay,
That's
so
what's
you don't have an
because
explanation
there's
as to
no
the
one
grounding
path.
of them. You don't have an explanation as to the grounding of them.
The grounding is universal moral principles.
Where did that come
is
from?
grounding. Those come from shared humanity. Those come from the universality of the human experience and the universality of human rights that transcended the class conflicts of feudalism.
I think you just repeated yourself by adding more words. You said that the universal moral principles came from humans, and I said that where did that come from? And you said that from universal shared experience of human beings. I think that you're just adding more words to the same thing. You didn't change what you said.
Do you agree that math itself is an objective description of the universe?
Yeah, but I have a grounding for that. The universal first causal principle, God, grounds math, and that's why math can be observed and be discovered by human beings.
That's not true.
How do you know that that's not true?
Mathematical equation for God.
No, I'm not.
Prove which God.
I'm not stating that there's a mathematical equation for God. I'm stating that math is a element of reality and existence, and the God of Christianity grounds existence, and therefore math is grounded in God. I'm telling you about the grounding, not that God can be equated to a mathematical equation. But in your worldview,
I'm not, just to explain my grounding.
What's the grounding for math in your worldview?
Based in universal things, and I think I'm not familiar with the analytic philosophy math for debunking why slavery is bad, but I would say in a math concept, you can say slavery depresses the GDP of a nation because you can't tax the income of a slave. You can only tax the profit you make of the property, and yes, it is cheaper for them to own slaves on the surface level, it looks like, but how it's actually they do not produce as much economic activity both as workers and consumers. So in a math case, slavery is actually a detriment to the economy, even though it's
I mean, Max, you're using math, and you and I are not disagreeing that you can use math. What I'm asking you is, what is the foundational grounding for the existence of math itself? You're saying it's a universal principle.
The fundamental laws of the universe.
Okay, the fundamental laws of the universe. Where did those come from?
The Big Bang. That's about as far as science will go. It's okay to say I don't know. It doesn't mean therefore God. That's my position at least.
Okay, so the Big Bang, you'd agree, is one of the models of the origin of the universe, right?
Yes, and a Catholic priest who believes in God is the one who came up with it.
Yeah, but nonetheless, it's not the only model, right?
Yes, it isn't the only model, and scientists.
So you would say. So would you say? Would you say that the scientific community does not have a consensus on what the origin of the universe is?
I would say consensus coalesces around the Big Bang, but in vaguer terms than certain explanations of the nature of the Big Bang.
What I mean is, not every scientist who is qualified in the area agrees that the Big Bang is what originated everything.
It's a very large majority, but okay. I would have to do there are a few polls, but I can check those.
Okay. So, well, I'm glad you said earlier you don't know, but you also said that does not therefore mean God, because you don't know.
Yes, that is correct. I think science can answer things like that.
You think that there's a naturalistic explanation for everything in the universe?
That's going past my knowledge of quantum theory.
Okay, let me ask you another question. Do you think that science is based upon inductive reasoning?
No, it's based off of deductive reasoning.
So if I Google it right now, it's going to say science is based on deductive reasoning.
Scientific method is based off of deductive reasoning.
The scientific method is based on deduction? Wait a minute. What's the first step in science? Isn't it observation?
It can be, but it's generally characterized as a hypothesis.
Hypothesis comes after the observation, right? Come on. This is basic.
A hypothesis can be based on an observation, but it can also be based on an assumption, based on a lot of different factors, based on intuition.
But you would say that assumptions are not scientific, right?
Yeah, well, the point of a scientific method is to prove if the assumption, the hypothesis, is scientifically true or not.
And the assumption is often based. You would say the assumption is often based upon an observation.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. Everything I've looked up, and maybe you know something I don't. The first step of science is observation, and then you have an hypothesis. Somebody says, this is what I think is causing this or that. And then there is experimentation, where they validate or invalidate their hypothesis. And if there's repeatable success, then that hypothesis becomes a theory. It becomes a theory, right? Am I getting this wrong?
Yes, though scientific theory does mean something different than an uneducated guess.
Okay. So it's based upon induction. And if you look up inductive reasoning, you will also realize that inductive reasoning does not give you certainty, and that's why science is open to revision, right? It's like you're gone, man.
No, the thing about the scientific method is it uses deductive reasoning because everything in the chain has to be true.
Okay.
The premise.
Okay. I'm just gonna.
Once the hypothesis is wrong, once you finish a specific scientific method, you test and you see your hypothesis is wrong. You change the hypothesis. The hypothesis becomes a product of the result of the scientific method.
Are you aware that deductive reasoning gives you certainty in the conclusion from the premises?
Yes, but...
Okay, how can you say that science is based upon deductive reasoning when science has a history of failed consensus?
I would attribute that to the fallibility of humans themselves. The scientific method hasn't changed. Evidence has. I think that's a general description of the technology, the attitudes.
But I'm disagreeing with you that scientific method is based upon
surrounding it.
I'm disagreeing with you that the scientific method is based upon deductive reasoning because everywhere you Google this right now or look at a dictionary, science is based upon inductive reasoning. It's based upon the principle of induction. You make an observation and then you make a general conclusion, or general conclusions from specific observations, because scientists cannot at any moment observe every instance of a phenomenon in the world and in the universe. So they have to make specific observations and then make generalizations from those observations.
Okay, I get where you're...
So what I'm saying is that scientific method itself cannot give you certainty. It has to give you a high degree of certainty. High degree of probability, not certainty. Just a high degree of probability, right?
The assumption and the testability can be argued to be a element of inductive reasoning, but the application and the testing itself is deductive. You have to test whether something is true or not.
Okay.
You can't make a general observation. It has to be either true or wrong, and then you make a new hypothesis based off of the old recent test that you made, and you deduce the application. But you have to use certain types of inductive reasoning to maybe construct the specific
perfect.
itself.
So we're on the same page. It's based upon inductive reasoning, which does not give you ultimate certainty and absolute
I'm not saying
certainty.
it's all. No, I'm saying the element of inductive reasoning is the hypothesis. But I'm saying the element of deductive reasoning is that you have to test the hypothesis to be either true or not.
And the hypothesis,
if
all right,
the hypothesis or the evidence is false, then it is vice versa.
And the hypothesis, when it is tested and validated, is open to revision, right?
Yes, it is, because
So it's
someone
not.
may
So it's
be
not
able
absolute.
to reproduce the test itself and prove that either a certain element of the test or a certain element of the evidence that was deduced is wrong.
Perfect. So it's not
So
absolute.
that's why
So
the
when you
method itself is untouchable.
so when you say that your particular conclusion right now about the origin of the universe is the Big Bang, you could be wrong about that, right?
Yes. The
Okay,
Big Bang is a
perfect,
theory,
perfect.
and it's based off of concrete observations that are collected into a larger theory. There's the different types of theory.
All right. So in my worldview, when I look at the universe and I see that it is emblematic and exemplifies ultimate design and intentionality, and I say that this points to an ultimate designer and intentional designer, and you say that this particular thing is not God, it's something else, but you don't know what the something else is.
An argument from ignorance.
Well, it's not an argument from ignorance. I'm saying I know that it's God because of what I see in the universe. You're saying it's not God, but you don't have an alternative. You say you don't know what it is.
Yeah, I'm allowed to say that.
All right. I can live with that. But what I also have to say is that if you don't know what something is, you can't say what something isn't because you don't have a reference point.
No, yeah, I'm saying I can't prove there are no gods, but what my position can be, no gods have been proven to me.
I mean, I can live with that. No gods have been proven to you. I can live with that. But you're not saying that no gods exist. And you're also not saying that I'm wrong when I say
no gods exist, but I don't think that I can make any type of factual observation other than no religious text being proven to be true.
Well, I'm glad that is your position. That you're at least open to the possibility of God being real and God existing. I
I try to keep an open mind.
I guess what this conversation boils down to is that you ultimately believe that morality is subjective. Because let me just finish the statement.
But I know for a fact it's subjective. That is objectively true.
Okay. So I have no argument against you, man. If you think the morality is subjective, then all you're pushing on to me is a preference from a group or a preference from yourself about the position on slavery. That's all you're doing.
But I think rights transcend group preference.
But those rights
existed even when people didn't think of them. And that's how deeply I think they apply.
And in my worldview, rights come from the ultimate unifying first causal principle, God, who created the universe. And in your worldview, you don't know what the thing is. But we know that's
not true. Governments are the ones who define rights.
Well, governments are the ones who define rights that are based upon these universal principles that God has created and grounded in reality. And in your worldview, there is no God that you believe in right now because you don't have enough evidence for this God. But you also are saying that you don't know what the ultimate unifying first causal principle is. So in your worldview, you don't have an ultimate grounding for saying that these universal principles apply to every human being.
Just because I don't know for sure how the universe began, that doesn't undermine the universal principle of human rights.
No, I'm not saying that because you don't know how the universe began. I'm saying because you don't know what the ultimate unifying first causal principle that began the universe is. You don't know what that thing is. You can't point to that thing or say that thing grounds universal moral principles, and hence we can recognize them in reality. Because that thing, you don't know what it is, and you don't know what it is yet. And we can leave it there, We agree to disagree. And even though you and I were
comments saying that atheists view rape as okay, no, rape is a violation of consent, just like slavery.
Who said that?
Consent.
Who said that?
Beyond Mathematics said that. I don't believe rape is okay at all.
Beyond Mathematics said that atheists believe that rape is okay? Damn. Yeah. People have some crazy beliefs out here, man. I would never say that about an atheist. I would say
Yeah,
that about somebody who's an atheist who says that grape is okay, but not
yeah. I wouldn't
atheists.
say
No,
that.
no, no.
I wouldn't generalize that about religious people either.
Yeah, that was a gross generalization. But yo, Max, good conversation, man. Thank you for coming up.
Well, good conversation. Yeah, I gotta head out. I guess I'll hang around and see you, man. It was a productive conversation to have. Still think slavery is completely unjust.
Yeah, and we agreed to disagree in that I don't think that all forms of slavery are unjust. But that was a good conversation. Thank you, man, for coming up. And that was a debate. That was a debate. That was a debate. But I'm glad that we could have had a good conversation. Let's see what this guy's saying. Like, I don't even. I should have I should have looked at the name first. Because now I'm gonna have to wait until the blur goes away before I get to see the name. Wow, that first conversation was 50 minutes. It's almost an hour. Wow. Wow. Hey Noah, what's up? Crazy claim? Let me send you a request. Hear what's going on here. Oh, I can't request you up. It seems as though you don't have enough followers. Oh, there you go. Atheists can't say anything is inherently evil. It's just nature beyond mathematics. Yeah, I agree with that, man. That's what I was trying to point out with Max, and he ultimately said
Right.
that he's arguing for subjective morality. But it seemed as though he was arguing for objective morality. Hey, how you doing, Noah? What's up?
I'm doing good. I just want to talk about Max quick. Like, I agreed. So I'm a subjective. I'm not too big in the sphere, but I believe morality is subjective. But him saying that rights still exist, but then saying rights were defined by the government, like those seem to contradict each other.
Yeah,
Like,
I
it
was
seems
I was
like
I was pointing that out. I was pointing that out. One of the times he said that human rights are universal principles, but rights are derived from human beings. I mean, how can they be universal principles if they are derived from a specific group of human beings? In
I
his
completely agree.
worldview, in his worldview, it has contradictions that he can't identify. I don't know why.
If you're going to argue subjective morality, you also have to take the burden that, like, when people bring up scenarios like, well, you can't objectively say murder's wrong, you are murder, sorry, you need to accept that principle because you believe morality is subject to the person experiencing it. And
Yeah,
so that's the claim I would make. I think, like, I don't believe you can get from an is to an ought, and I don't
yeah,
believe you can
yeah.
really say, like for you, I will ask you, like, where are you deriving morality from? Had you not want to argue religion, where are you arguing or where are you deriving morality from? I can derive that 2 plus 2 is 4 in the universe. I can find ises, but I can't find what I ought to do. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. I do, and you're being very consistent. Are you an atheist?
So I'm an agnostic. I know there's a possibility that God exists, but I have different beliefs on it. So, like, I don't believe free will exists.
Me neither.
So,
Me neither.
oh wow, oh you don't? You're a
No.
determinist?
Yeah, I'm a Calvinist, and we're determinists.
Oh, I'm not too big into, like, I guess the lore of Calvinism. Could you explain? Could you explain?
Yeah, so in Calvinism we believe that God created all things based upon His decree, and His decree is what makes up the very fabric of time and everything that happens in the fabric of time, including our human actions, our thoughts, and our words. So, as human beings, everything we do, everything we say, everything we think is the direct result of God's will and God's ordination in our life. And also, God has determined and decided who will go to heaven and hell in the end, because everything that happens is because of His decree. So today I'm wearing two shirts. It was decreed for me to wear two shirts. There was no way of me doing otherwise. If there was a way or a possibility of me doing otherwise, then that means God did not know with absolute certainty what I will do, because those would just be intellectual guesses or intelligent guesses. So, I mean, in a nutshell, that's what Calvinism is as it relates to determinism. Everything we do is determined by God for His glory and for His honor, and hence everything that happens in the universe has an ultimate purpose. and has ultimate meaning.
That's interesting. Yeah, so that's a big contradiction that a lot of I feel like a lot of people who I guess wouldn't be Calvinists come to. It's like you think God is all powerful and he can tell the future, but he also like cannot predict. He doesn't determine whether people are going to hell or not. But he does know the exact future.
Yeah, of course, the contradiction. You can't say that you're not determined, but God knows where you're going to go when you are unalived. There's no way, because.
Right.
If I mean, and bro, there's this thing called open theism. It's the other extreme. They say that God does not know the future, and that's how we have free will, in that we are able to do something that God did not know we will do, and hence our destination is not fixed or determined. But that position contradicts scripture and historic Christian doctrine, because
Right.
we all believe as Christians God knows everything. We just disagree on how he knows everything, but the only consistent position is the Calvinistic position, in that we say God knows everything because he causes everything, and that's how he knows everything. So he knows everything
Yes.
with certain.
So is open theism based solely on like Yahweh? Because if it wasn't, I could possibly understand if they had like a different definition of what they meant by God. Like if God was something different than.
It's based on the God of the Bible, Yahweh. They say that the God of the Bible, Yahweh, does not know all things. And they point to examples like Genesis chapter 22, when Yahweh says to Abraham, "Now I know that you love me, or you are faithful to me." However, when you press them on their biblical interpretation of that, their position is that Yahweh knows present knowledge and past knowledge. He knows past things and present things. He doesn't know future things because the future does not yet exist. And that would be logically impossible for God to know something that doesn't exist. However, when you press them on that, and you look at the rest of Scripture, for example, in Romans chapter 4, it says that Abraham believed and Abraham knew in his heart that God would raise his son from unalivement after he unalived his son. That would have been present knowledge. But then they would also say out of the same mouth, Yahweh still did not know, even though they say that Yahweh has present knowledge. So their worldview and their interpretation of Scripture falls apart when you press them from the other side of the spectrum as a Christian. Because we don't think that open theists are Christians. We think that they have deviated from traditional historic Christian doctrine. And I am one of the people who point that out to them, that you are proposing a worldview that is inconsistent and unbiblical. Because saying that God does not know the future is to say that God cannot make any promises, cannot make any prophecies, cannot make any declarations about you or I, because he doesn't know anything. And one last thing, Christ cannot be unalived on the cross for the sins of all those who would believe, since he does not know who will believe, and he does not know who will sin and who will exist. It destroys the gospel completely. They're not Christians.
Right. Okay. So I have to go in a minute, but I just want to say one more thing. So I'm sure that you believe morality is objective, right? Based off Scripture.
Yeah. And in philosophy, I take divine command theory, which gives me a basis for objective morality. The only problem is the epistemological problem, where I would have to justify how I know that my religious perspective and worldview is revelatory of God's law.
Right. Sure. I won't even take it that route. The route I'm going to take it on is that if you're going to say that morality is objective, yet determinism is true, kind of what is the point of morality at all? Like, what does morality really mean to people who are just kind of influenced by their environment? So I take the view of, the view of Sam Harris of like, you can do what you will, but you can't will what you will for free will. And that's what I think about like determinism. I read his book, and I've seen. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yeah, I heard of him.
Yeah, so you can just make decisions based on what you will, but your will is always determined by something external of yourself. So it's kind of like a logical, atheistic type view of.
That's similar to what we believe. Your
Yes.
your will is determined by God's will. But let me tell you why there is a point to morality in the Christian worldview. The point to morality is that by God giving a law to humanity, God can hold humans accountable when he decrees that they break his law, and hence glorify himself in his justice when he judges them for breaking his law, even though he's the one who decrees it, which gives the law a purpose and gives morality a purpose and gives meaning in that there is no such thing in the universe as purposeless evil. However, when you remove God from the equation and you say everything is determined by natural laws and natural effects, then everything is just a natural effect and nothing has ultimate meaning and value and nothing is ultimately wrong. You would have to be a hard determinist as a determinist from a natural perspective.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I agree. I have to go, but thank you for talking to me. This is good. This is very good. And you and Max's conversation was very good as well. He was good.
Thank you, man. I hope to talk to you again so that we can dive a little bit deeper into it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll add you. See you.
See you, man. Yeah. Calvinism, Reformed theology is the only consistent worldview as it relates to God and sin and evil and all of that. It is the only consistent worldview. We don't believe in free will. Free will destroys consistency in Christianity. And I'm going to say that over and over again. If anybody on here is a Christian and you believe in free will, you have abandoned consistency. I'm sorry, but it's true. Let's hear what's going on here.
Yo, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. I'm gonna go to your second point because that's like the one I'm like most familiar with. I'm not an atheist, and your third point is kind of just like a conclusion, it seems. So I'll go to your second point. So I was in your debate with the other guy, I forgot his name, but you mentioned that the slaves have rights, correct? That's what you said.
In Christianity, yes.
Yeah. So you're familiar with Leviticus, right? I'm assuming, yeah. Leviticus.
Yeah. All of those laws in Leviticus where slaves are treated without dignity, without value, they are wrong. Those are examples of God commanding his people to do evil things.
Oh, wait, so like you're saying that Leviticus was wrong? Like that type of slavery is wrong?
Yeah, it is.
Oh. Wait, well, so like, do you think that because God's the one who like said that they're allowed to do it, so what do you think is wrong?
Yeah. Let me say it again, and I'm gonna be as clear as I can. In my worldview as a Calvinist, and Calvinism is very, very old, it's very, very consistent, and so on. God, because he determines and decrees all things, he determines and decrees that people commit sin, and in Scripture we see where he commands people to commit sin. And one of those examples is when he commanded David to number Israel and then punished David for numbering Israel. And other examples is what I can point out. But slavery, with regards to a human being treating another human being less than human or inhumane, those are examples of God commanding people to commit sin. And Leviticus is one of those places.
So, do you think him commanding people to commit sin is like wrong, or you think he's doing it for a reason? I'm confused.
Yeah. So God, the God of the Bible, he decrees that people commit sin, and he commands that people commit sin to either hold them accountable for that sin and hence glorify himself in justice, or he pardons the sin and glorifies himself in his grace. So the purpose is for God's glorification and for God's own will being accomplished. That's the purpose. So it gives these events and these things that take place in history and in time a purpose, in that they are not purposeless and meaningless. They are all based upon God's glory and God's will.
Okay, but if he's like the grandeur of the universe and he knows that people know that, and why would he command them to do anything if he knows that they're going to listen? Or that they will most likely listen to him?
Because God not only ordains the ends, but he ordains the means to the ends. So God can ordain that I wear green shoes tomorrow, and that's I am fated to wear green shoes tomorrow. But God has also determined the means that I get up out of my bed, go take a shower, then go put my socks on, then put the shoes on. So the means to the end is also decreed by God. So the question of why would God command them if he has decreed them to do what they do? It is because God's command is also a part of his decree, and that is the means to the end of them doing what he decreed them to do. which is to, treat some, because you have examples in the Old Testament, man, and you probably know of them when God sends the Israelites to go and take people as slaves against their will and treat them badly and stuff like that. Those are all examples of God commanding evil actions to be done.
Oh, okay. So like, you think that all like the examples of slavery, like where it's like not indentured, is wrong? Like you think that?
I think that all forms of slavery where someone is owned against their will and is treated less than a human is wrong. And why do I say that? I say that because the Bible makes a distinction between what it affirms and what it records. I'll give you a quick example. The Bible records David committing adultery, but it does not affirm it. So the Bible records the Israelites owning slaves and treating them badly under God's command, but it does not affirm it, in that the Old Testament in Genesis says that we're all made in God's image, and therefore we are all equal and we're all deserving of value and worth. Any human being who treats another human being less than that is an example of sin. So here's my argument for why biblical slavery is not wrong. When you go to the New Testament and you see Colossians chapter 4, verse 1, it says, "Masters, treat your slaves with justice and fairness. Treat them like equals." And 1 Corinthians chapter 7, it says, "If you are able to be free, rather do that." So Paul gives you the alternative. It is better to be free than to be a slave of a human being. But if you are a slave of a human being, you ought to be treated with justice and fairness. And anything short of that, John, is sin.
Okay, so in Exodus, when it says that if a slave owner strikes a slave, and as long as they don't die within the first 2 days, they get unpunished, you don't think that he's saying that, or you think he's recording it? Like, which one do you think it is?
It is a command given to Moses by God, and it is an example of something, if it happened in history, because we don't know if it happened. Well, you know what? Let's say it happened. It happened because there are ways of, administering discipline, if those are examples of discipline, without hurting the person, without treating the person as if they are less than humans. Those are examples of sin, God commanding sin.
Wait, can you repeat the last part? It like cut off. I didn't hear you say.
I would say that's an example of sin because that is an example of a human being mistreating another human being.
So you think that every time that God's commanding sin, he's doing it for like his own purpose? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah. And if you read Romans chapter 9, you learn about the two vessels from the potter. The potter makes one vessel of honor and one vessel of dishonor. So a piss pot and a teapot. And those vessels are for the purpose of God's glory, in that there are people that God has created for the very purpose of going to hell, and also the means by which they go there, and other people who are going to go to heaven and the means by which they go there, all of which are glorifying God in his decrees and in his purpose. And one of those things, as a matter of fact, let me bring something else up. There are examples in the Bible of brother and sister cohabitating. Abraham and Sarah were brother and sister, and they had children. And Isaac and Rebekah were cousins. They had children. And Jacob and Leah and Jacob and Rachel were cousins, and they had children. But in Leviticus, it says that you should not sleep with your sibling, and you should not sleep with your cousin. So you have these commands that go against that, but God commanding Abraham and his, posterity to do these things because there was a purpose that God had in commanding that sin to happen. The same way he had a purpose in commanding the sin of slavery to happen. He always has a purpose. So I can look at that, John, and say, that's evil. That's wrong. Incest is wrong. Sleeping with your brother and sister is wrong because there's command against it. But God, decrees it for his purpose. He has his purpose. He has his reasons. And, there comes a point where I can't question God. But I can say I know why God does what he does, because he does everything for his glory, and everything has a purpose because of that. But sorry for going so long, man. Go ahead.
It's all right. I have music in the background. I don't know if you're able to hear it or not, but
yeah, you're actually louder than the music, so I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, well, that was all I really wanted to know because I'm already knowledgeable in the Bible, so I'm not going to defend any other thing that you say or anything like that. But I was just trying to see if you thought that slavery was wrong, because I know some Christians would say that that all of it was indentured. Some would say that it's not wrong at all. It depends who you talk to. So
I mean, even if it's indentured, servitude, it opens the possibility of the slave master mistreating the slave, because indentured servitude would be somebody, giving themselves over as a slave so that they can pay off a debt. I wouldn't say that kind of slavery is wrong. What I would say is wrong is if the slave master mistreats that slave, because he probably could. That person is his property as long as that person owes him money. He could. I'm saying wherever that occurs, wherever a human being mistreats another human being, which is what we have historically from the slavery that we know about, people who have my skin color. Those are all examples of evil actions. They're decreed by God for his ultimate purpose, but they are all evil actions.
Okay, well, thanks for answering what I asked, because but I enjoyed talking to you, and I'll let someone else go up now because I probably do want to go.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you, man.
Okay, yeah, have a good one.
So, guys, I'm on my YouTube channel right now. I'm live on my YouTube channel. Prisoners of war fell in that category. My position is very, very public. I'm a Calvinist. I'm Reformed. I'm Presbyterian. It is very easy for you to look up what I believe and find what I believe and critique what I believe, because everything I believe is public. It's in the Westminster Confession of Faith, and so on and so forth. We believe that God decrees sin, that God ordains sin. And the only reason why sin exists is because God decrees it, God ordains it, and he does so for a purpose. So there is no such thing as purposeless evil in the world. There's no such thing as meaningless evil. You believe in stoning your loved one? No, I don't believe in that. I'm a Christian. I'm not an Israelite. There were laws that were only applicable to the Israelites that they had to follow. However, as a Christian, I follow the principles of the Old Testament law, because like Paul, when he used the Old Testament law, God say it in the Bible, though. Yes, that's why I believe it. I believe it happened. I believe God commanded it. But God also gives commands to specific people for a specific time. And one of those commands is stoning somebody for blasphemy and so on and so forth. But when you go to the New Testament, Christians, for example, let me give you an example. The penalty for a man sleeping with his mother's wife was unalivement. That was the penalty. In the church, in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, there was a church member who was having an inappropriate relationship with his father's wife. The church did not, unalive that person. The church just excommunicated that person. So when you look at those Old Testament laws where somebody was unalived, somebody was cut off from their people because of some sin, the principle behind that is disfellowship and excommunication in the Christian sense and the Christian worldview. That's the principle behind those laws. God also say you shall not add or take from his commands. I'm not adding or taking from his commands. I'm saying that the principle behind the command continues today for every Christian, in that we look at the Old Testament law, we look at the laws of the Israelites that God gave them because we serve and worship the same God. Those principles continue today. That's how the New Testament saints used the Old Testament law. That's how Paul used it, and that's how Christians use it. So, in the church, if we have a child who's consistently blaspheming their parents. We have a child who consistently takes the Lord's name in vain. We have someone who is in an open, inappropriate relationship with somebody who's not their wife. We don't stone, we excommunicate. And that's the principle behind the stone thing. I don't know if I can even say that on TikTok. That's the principle behind it. So we follow the principles, Thomas. We follow the principles. We don't say the law is done away with, the law is abolished. No, we follow the principles. Also, what's up with everyone who hovering in all that Paul says? He's not your God. Didn't meet him. Well, man, to say Paul says in a Christian perspective is to say God says, because God was speaking through Paul. And the reason why I say Paul says is because I'm making reference to one of his letters that was inspired by God. I don't need to meet Paul. All I have to do is read what he wrote and have the witness of the Holy Spirit testifying to me that it is the Word of God, which every Christian has. So changing the narrative to suit your belief. No, Thomas, I'm not changing the narrative. I'm looking at what historical Christian doctrine says and what Christians have believed historically and how they used the law, and I'm adopting what they said and believing what they said, because I can't claim to be a Christian and not believe what Christians believe and what Christians have wrote in the past. Yeah, fancy that. Assuming I believe Jesus. I'd not believe simply claim of some guy who does things Jesus would almost certainly not endorse. What did Paul do? Well, what did Paul say in his letters that Jesus Christ wouldn't endorse? Sorry, my phone is making it hard to type right now. I understand, man. It's okay. You want to come up? Let me see if we can come up. Get up here, man. Come on up here. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation. Thomas keeps throwing scriptures at me. Let me bring Thomas up here. Nah, in a public space. So yeah, you change it. No, I didn't change it. I can probably shortly. Okay. Understand it's Nictus. Understand it's Nictus. Thomas, get up here, man. Let's have a conversation. You should like to quote scriptures at me and say I'm changing things. Or maybe Thomas is in a public place too. I'm an amputee. Please pray. If God wills it, pray Miko's hand grows back by tomorrow. Miko, your hand will not grow back. I'm sorry. The same way my finger will not grow back. I have 9 fingers. Your hand will not grow back. I'm sorry. It's not going to happen. Oh, no, I'm not an atheist. I believe the Bible, and those miracles that took place in the New Testament no longer take place today. People having that's a performative contradiction. No, it's not. Miko, you have to do some more reading, man. You have to study Christian theology, man. Like, you're making statements that you have no faith. Oh no, don't say that. You're misunderstanding Christian theology. You need to do some more reading. On my way to the shower. Okay, I understand, Thomas. Yo, man, I'm pretty cool generally. So get up here. We have a conversation. I think there's a high likelihood that we will, not bump heads too much. We'll have a productive conversation. Miko, you need to read Christian theology and not make statements from ignorance. Okay. The miracles of the New Testament, where people were being raised from being unalived, and people were people who were born crippled were able to walk, and people probably had amputees and they grew back. Those were all miracles to authenticate the apostles as being messengers of God. And therefore, what they wrote was taken to be authoritative and taken to be messages from God to them, to the church. We don't have any more apostles today. We don't have any more prophets today. So we don't need these miracles to authenticate anyone. Therefore, these miracles are no longer around. So if you say that because I don't believe that your amputee will grow back, then I'm not a Christian. You can say that all you want. Just know that you're misrepresenting Christianity. And you need to do some more reading and studying and understand what you're saying more. I'm not even going to pray. Why would I pray for you to grow your arm back? Why would I pray for something that will never happen? It's like me praying for God to not be God anymore. That's not going to happen. The same way I'm not going to pray for my finger to grow back, because it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to pray because I have no faith. No, that's not why I'm not going to pray. I'm not going to pray because God has not promised any one of us that our amputees will grow back in this life. Or like praying for God to do anything. Also, God can't heal. Of course, God can heal, but he has decided that he will not heal in that way anymore, since he has used those miracles to authenticate his apostles. And the canon of scripture is closed after the apostles wrote scripture down in the New Testament. Again, Miko, read Christian theology so that you can understand it more and not misrepresent it. Okay, please. Who's coming up now? Billy Bob. Billy Bob.
Yo, what's up?
I'm doing good, Billy. How you doing?
Wait, how's like atheism irrational?
No, not atheism. Philosophical atheism.
Right, what's the difference?
Atheism is the lack of belief. Philosophical atheism is the proposition God does not exist.
Okay. Wait, why do you think God exists?
The reason why I think God exists is because when I look at the world, to me at least, it exemplifies ultimate design and intentionality. It is emblematic of ultimate design and intentionality. And it points to an ultimate intentional designer that is the unifying first causal principle that actualizes, sustains, and controls all of existence. And that can only be God, because we have instances of rationality, consciousness, and logic, and that can only be grounded in a logical, conscious, rational source, and that's God.
Well, wouldn't you say that logic is just a brute fact of the universe?
I would say that logic and every other fact is a brute fact without God. If God doesn't exist, everything is a brute fact and has no ultimate explanation as to why it exists and what grounding it has for its existence. Everything is a brute fact without God.
All right,
So yes, I would say yes, logic is a brute fact without God and everything else.
all right, so wait. So ultimate design, like what do you see that's like ultimately designed?
I would say that the universe exemplifies order and disorder, and because it exemplifies order, it points to something that orders it, something that structures it, something that directs it. And that thing has to be intentional and rational for the world to be the way it is. Because if it's non-rational, non-intentional, then we should expect everything to be chaotic, not everything to be chaotic and ordered, but everything on a whole to be chaotic. But we don't see we don't see chaos on every scale. Therefore, there has to be something guiding everything, and I don't think it's natural laws that are impersonal.
Wait, by chaos, you mean what?
By chaos, I mean earthquakes, tsunamis, sickness, diversity of phenomena, things like that.
Wouldn't you say that those could just occur naturally, like the tectonic plates just shift together, creating earthquakes, or shift apart, creating earthquakes?
I would say there is a naturalistic explanation for why those things occur. However, I would say as a Christian that the way those things occur are just the means by which God brings those things about in reality, because he's the one who's governing and controlling all things, including order and disorder. And because there's order and disorder, it points to a God who is intentional and is ordering everything.
Okay, my question is, why would God put the building blocks for DNA in like asteroids and meteorites?
The building blocks for DNA and asteroids and meteorites, I have to tell you, man, I don't know why God would do something like that. I guess that I would have to just say that he's the one who did it, not some naturalistic entity that is not rational, not logical, and not conscious. I don't know why he did it, but I have to say he did it because it exists. It's real. It's a reality. I didn't even know that was true, though. They're building blocks of DNA on those things, man. I didn't know that. It's actually
Scientists found them in space rocks.
yeah. I mean, I don't know why God would do that. I guess I would just have to say that he did.
So my question is, would you say that God just? How would you say God created us? Would you say he created us in like a snap of a finger, or just like what process?
I would have to go back to Genesis and say that he created from the dust of the earth Adam, and I don't take those things to be literal in the traditional sense. I look at those passages in Genesis and ascertain what the ancient Near Eastern people would have believed when they read that, and take that understanding and what they believed when they read that God took from the dust of the earth and made Adam. They took that to mean that human beings, that is symbolic for human beings being fragile, human beings being temporal, human beings being physical. That's all it means symbolically. But God, from his essence, breathes into man and he becomes a living soul. So that's how God created human beings.
Okay. And my last question for you is, if would you say God created energy, and if so, how? Because if energy can be like created or destroyed in a closed system, wouldn't you say that the universe itself is just a closed system? And
when I looked at the conservation of energy information, what I got was that the conservation of energy describes the behavior of energy. It doesn't describe the nature of energy, in that scientists have observed that they are the ones, they cannot create or destroy energy. They can only convert energy into different forms. That's all they can do with energy. But to extrapolate from that energy is therefore eternal and energy has always existed, is not what the conservation of energy stipulates. That is an assumption and a conclusion drawn from the conservation of energy that is not necessitated by the conservation of energy, that just describes the behavior of energy, not the nature of energy. So I wouldn't say that energy is eternal. I would say that energy is an expression of God's work in the universe, and that when God created the universe, he also created energy, and energy is an expression in the universe of how God does some things, but not all things, because that's not all God does in the universe. He does everything. He controls energy, he controls matter, controls the universe and everything in it, because he's the ultimate first causal principle that controls, sustains, and creates reality.
Okay, well, thank you for your time for answering my questions.
Thank you so much for being respectful, man. I heard of you. I was on the panel listening to when you were talking to Darth Dawkins. He's my teacher. He taught me this stuff, so
really?
I owe it to him. You know.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good one. Yeah. Everyone's so respectful today, man. This is a good day. But wow, I am losing a lot of energy. Wait, let me see how long I've been going. YouTube Live. Wow, I've been going for 1 hour and 30 minutes. I think the reason why I feel the way I do is because I haven't had breakfast yet. Did I just hear you say Darth Dawkins taught you? Well, Adam, to be honest, Darth Dawkins didn't really teach me. Darth Dawkins recommended the books that he learned what he knows. He recommended the books to me that he read that gave him the knowledge that he has. So I know what I know because of Darth Dawkins. So in that sense, he's my teacher. So I mean, I can't disconnect myself from Darth Dawkins when what I know about my apologetic in regards to God's existence was through the means of Darth Dawkins introducing me to this book called The Objective Proof of Christianity. So I read that book and I got the argument. God is a precondition for intelligibility. God is a precondition for existence. God is the precondition for reality itself. And to deny that would be to, in principle, operate that something else is the ultimate unifying first causal principle of all things. And you have to tell us what the something else is. I'm just looking at the comments here. Hold on. Darth Dawkins, your teacher? Oh boy, I feel sad for you. Thomas, come on, man. He's not my teacher in the traditional sense. He is the means by which I was introduced to a book that I read, and I have the same argument that he has because that's the same book he read. So ultimately, Darth Dawkins and I were taught by Greg Bonson and Cornelius Van Til. So Cornelius Van Til and Greg Bonson are my teacher. And they are Darth Dawkins' teacher as well. Pray on all occasions with all kinds of prayer requests. Yeah, Miko, you're just, taking that out of context without understanding what the scripture is saying. Darth also doesn't believe in God. Miko, that's a lie, and you know it. Petitions, prayers, intercessions, thanksgiving should be made for all people. Yeah, it should be made for all people. But there are things that we can't pray for. What's the argument for premise one? The argument for premise one is that the argument for premise one is not an argument. It is a demonstration. It is a demonstration that absent God, there is no justification for objective morals, no justification or grounding for logic, for truth, for inductive reasoning, and so on and so forth. What's that book title you just mentioned, please? It is called The Objective Proof of Christianity. That's what I read, and that's where I got all my arguments from, and that's where Darth Dawkins got his arguments from too. Only Darth thinks he knows things. He just preached to avoid the questions. Okay. So no argument. Again, Miko, the truth of premise one is not through an argument. It is through a demonstration. I'm not going to go down this infinite regress with you. I'm not going to go down the infinite regression with you, because if I give you an argument for premise one, you're going to ask me, what's the argument for that? And then I give you another argument, you're going to say, what's the argument for that? I'm not going to go down that line with you, man. That's just restating the claim. Yeah, it is restating the claim. And if you disagree with the claim, then you have to tell me what the ultimate unifying first causal principle is that actualizes, sustains, and controls reality. Why are you lying? I don't know what you're talking about as it relates to me lying. There is a justification. We just don't know what it is, but Christians assert God. Of course, Arizona, you don't know what it is. Those are the two answers we get on this apologetic. Either there is nothing or you don't know what it is. I can live with that. You don't know what it is, so don't make knowledge claims about what it isn't. So no argument. Yeah, no argument. Darth doesn't preach. He monologues. It's not making sense. Mac, sorry, man. I'm not as intelligent as I need to be to make it make sense to you. We don't have to because we don't know. Doesn't mean you can assert God. Again, when you say you don't know what something is, and then you say it's not God, you are speaking authoritatively from ignorance, which is a fallacy in logic. It is when you make a claim or make a statement without having sufficient information. You don't know what it is, so you don't have the capacity to say, man, I'm slurring in my speech. Damn. You don't know what it is, so you don't honestly have the capacity to say what it isn't. You have to know what it is to say what it isn't. You doing the same thing when they don't know, they assert God. Mac, you need to come up here and have a conversation, man. That's what you're doing. Premise one. Miko, you got to come up here and have a conversation. I'm done reading comments, man. You guys are giving me too many comments to read. Okay, I think these people were just... Wow, there's a lot of requests that came up. And then withdrawn. Have breakfast after 12. Icon, you know what? I'm gonna call you Icon. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, Icon. Are you an atheist?
No, man. I just wanted to say I appreciate your live, and not too many Calvinists out there, or determinists of God and things like that. So I'm working on my studies as well in the same direction with Cornelius Van Til, Greg Bonson, Calvin, things like that. So just wanted to encourage you, keep going. I'm sure you get encouragement all the time, but just want to be another one.
Thank you so much, Icon. I really needed that, man. Thank you so much. Keep me in your prayers, okay?
Yeah, I just sent a text to my wife. I was like, "Hey, we found another Calvinist, man." so I sent her your link.
Thank you so much, man. I'm glad I have another one out there, because there's not many of us, as you rightly said. There's not many of us.
Yeah. All right. Well, enjoy your day. God bless you. Get some food, man.
Yeah.
I don't want to see you pass out. It's hard work.
It's mentally draining, man. Trust me. I'm gonna go get some food in like 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, I'm out of here. Thank you so much, man. Thank you, man. Have a good one.
All right, you too, Adrian.
Me. I need to get some food soon. Wow, what's happening with my internet on my YouTube? YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain. Okay, connection is back. I hope that. Let me play this. Or blasphemy and so on and so forth. But when you go to the New Testament, Christians, for example, let me give you an example. The penalty for a man. Yeah, I'm on YouTube sleeping with his mother's wife. I have a YouTube channel. It's called The Right Perspective, and I'm live right now on that YouTube channel. I only have like 200 subscribers. It's not very big, but I like to have these conversations on TikTok and go live on YouTube so that the whole thing is recorded. Because sometimes these conversations go up to 4 hours, 5 hours and stuff. And I don't have enough going to sub on YouTube. Thank you so much, man. I don't have enough memory in my laptop to record hours upon hours of video, so I have to go live. Calvinists functionally live as atheists, but LARP as Christians to cope. Calvinism collapses into strict fatalism, where prayer is performative and miracles are impossible. Calvinism is atheism, but with extra steps. Miko, I'm gonna mute you, man, because you're just spewing lies now. I'm gonna mute you. If you want to come up, we can have a conversation. But now you're muted, so you can stop lying. You say that Calvinism is atheism. I mean, I can't even say that you're lying. I can't even say that because you probably actually think that you're telling the truth. I guess that, again, I'm going to say, go and open a book and read to learn what Calvinism is before you come and criticize it. At least come from a place of knowledge when you're criticizing a worldview or perspective so that you don't misrepresent it, because you just misrepresented Calvinism. We are not atheists. We're not atheists. And you said we were. How would you feel if I said you were a Christian? You're just a Christian with extra steps. Yeah. You're done commenting on my video. You can come up here and have a respectful conversation. And I'm actually going to invite you. I'm going to invite you. Oh, I can't invite you. The option isn't there to invite you. Maybe it's because I muted you. Let me see if I unmute you. I'll be able to invite you. Let me see. Nope, still no option to invite you up here. So if all you can do is comment, then we can't have a conversation. Maybe my next live video, your comments will be truthful and we can actually dialogue. If he believes in a God, how is he an atheist? I mean, yeah. Yeah, how am I an atheist? I mean, come on. He's just being disingenuous right now. And that's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. All right, I need to edit this video. Let's say... So you don't believe in free will? No, free will does not exist. Free will is an illusion. Let me see who's requesting up. Dino. Damn. Let me see if that's how your name is pronounced. Is your name Dino?
Yep, like dinosaur.
Or Dino. Dino or
Yeah.
Dino?
Dino.
Oh, Dino. Because I have a little brother named Dino.
Yeah.
So I thought that you were like, same thing.
That's a cool name for a kiddo. Dino, I like that.
Yeah. He's actually not a kid anymore. He's my kid brother, but he's in his 20s now, so he's not a kid anymore. It's Dheno, Dino, but you can't spell it like that, Dino. So I thought that your name was Dino.
Wasn't there a cartoon character named Dino? Am I making that up? I feel like I've heard that name somewhere else too.
That's a very good question, man. I'm gonna have to look into that. Maybe there is.
I think there was. I'm in my 40s, so I'm an 80s baby. I think there was a cartoon character named Dino. I can't remember what it was. Anyway, sorry. Not the subject.
I'm a 90s baby. I'm a 90s baby. I'm 30.
Gotcha. Hey, I just wanted to see what were your thoughts, and I don't know, maybe you've had this conversation, maybe you haven't. I'm not looking for like a knee-jerk reaction, but just the theme of flood ethics from the Great Flood, like the ethics of that. What are your thoughts on that initially?
Like, was it right for God to flood the whole world, or?
Yeah, just not so much like whether his choice was right or wrong, but just like if we remove God from situation, what do you think are the ethical standards that you would hold to the flood, the event? Like if I could cause a worldwide flood right now, what ethical or causal framework do you think we would assess that by? And again, I'm not a god. I'm not the creator. I'm not the rule maker.
I think I'm probably having a problem comprehending what you're asking. So I guess I have to probably ask some clarifying questions. Are you asking me are you asking me to look at the flood absent God and tell you what I think the cause of it would be and what the ethical framework behind it would be?
More of which is, if you were in the position to cause that, would you do the same way? And if so, what are your reasons for that?
Oh, if I was in the same position as God, I don't think I would have done that. No, I wouldn't have done that. No.
That's fair. I think that's a very fair answer. I respect that.
I wouldn't do that. I mean, I guess I would also have to say I'm not God. But if I were to answer your question honestly, no, I wouldn't do that. I would probably do something different.
Yeah, I actually really respect that answer, and I do. And I also agree that we're not God. We can't make that judgment call, and only God knows why.
And that's the purpose. That's the purpose for hypotheticals. It tests your logic, it tests your consistency, and it evaluates your honesty. Can you be honest with hypotheticals? And
absolutely, I agree. Again, I really appreciate your answer because I think it's a very valid answer. I respect that 100%. Because when people aren't genuine enough to answer it that way, sometimes they feel like they get cornered to they just have to defend God at all costs. Whereas when you can be open and honest with answering just like you did, again, I have full respect for that, 100%.
I can be honest even beyond that. There are things that God has decided to do in the Bible and through history that if I were God, I wouldn't have done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can say that beyond just the flood. There are things that I wouldn't have done. But that just goes to show that me and God, I and God are different. We're different. So he does things different. The same way that maybe if you and I went to a bar together, you would order a different drink than I would. We're different. That's the beauty of existence. We're all unique and we're all different, and me and God are different. So he did that, and I would have done something else, and that's just me being honest with the question.
Yeah, again, I respect that. I've had some conversations where people, again, back to the knee-jerk reaction, which is how I open up the question. They will defend in the absence of just giving an honest answer. So that's what I mean by I totally respect what you said. Because, like, for me, example, making babies float and drowning babies, to me, I would never do that, right? I would never.
Yeah, me neither.
Find another way. I would probably just pull them into heaven. I would remove them from the evils. I wouldn't consider babies evil, and knowing that they weren't of the 8 that made it onto the boat, I would never just drown babies. You know what I mean? Same thing with elderly, with pregnant women, with anything that potentially was in existence. And I know we don't have 100% evidence of what was or wasn't in existence, but
and we can assume that all of those things exist. Old people, pregnant people,
if you have an entire
babies, an entire planet, an entire world. We can safely assume that, and I agree with you. I wouldn't have done that.
Assume, right? We can rationally assume.
Yeah.
There are elderly populations, young populations, and everything in between in this world that was changed. Yeah. I would say it's not even just assume, but we can rationally deduce.
Yeah.
More than likely.
It would be a rational deduction. And I can agree with you that I would have done something different. Maybe, I mean, the same thing you said. I would have probably removed elderly babies and people who were righteous from the earth if I could find righteous people, and just transport them into heaven without them having to go through the pain of drowning. I would have done that. I would have done that. And I'm not saying that I'm better than God. There's somebody down there, happy daddy of 3. I'm not saying that I'm better than God. I'm just saying that as a human being that bases my morality on what God has revealed in his law, and based upon my upbringing, and I'm not disconnected from my environment and my upbringing and my nurture, based upon the kind of person I am as an adult and the kind of person I am as a human being, I would have done things differently if I had the chance to do that. And I'm just being honest. It doesn't mean I'm better than God. It just means that I'm different.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I would just parallel that. But someone else could say, basing their morality on the greater good of humanity, survival of species, and speciation over time, that they would also deduce that drowning offspring is not a rational decision to make for a species or for the success of a species.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by we can have a lot of commonality, and if we have different belief systems. But again, I appreciate your honesty, because you're actually the first theist that has openly and answered the way that you did when I've challenged him with that question. So I have nothing but respect for you.
Yeah. I mean, we have to hear what the questions are from the other side and answer them accurately and answer them honestly. Even if it puts us in a place where we have to be defensive, we have to answer them, at least answer it honestly, and then hear what the other side has to say to your answer. But if you answer it honestly, it also shows your Christian integrity in that you are a believer of truth and you claim to be honest as a Christian. So be honest. Be honest.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree.
Yeah.
Any other topics you want to talk about? If not, I'll dip out. That's the only question I have for you.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to say thank you, man, for being respectful and being calm and calculated and asking a question and honestly wanting the answer. Because as you well know, some people ask questions and they don't want the answer. They just want to trap you and attack you.
Yeah.
And you didn't do that. You really wanted to know my answer and you got it. And I'm glad that you and I we had civility in this conversation and we can walk away respecting each other.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely, man. Have a good day. I'll catch you later.
Same here.
Peace.
Happy daddy of 3. No, my morality isn't better or superior than God's. As a matter of fact, when you use the word superior or its synonym in this regard, better, then you are presupposing a standard or a law that dictates what is better and what is superior. If you and I do a test, if you and I do a math test, and we bring our results to the math teacher, and you get a 90 on your result, and I get an 80, and someone came and asked the both of us, which one of us did better on the math test? You're the obvious answer. Why? Because you got a 90 and I got an 80. And the reason why you would be the one who's better, or the one who did better, is because the standard is 100. The standard is 100, and we know that the standard is 100. The one that is closer to the 100, or the one that is closer to the standard, is the better one. When you say that my morality is better than God's, or my morality is superior to God, in your worldview, what is the standard? What is the standard that I and God are compared to for you to say that my morality is superior or my morality is better? And if you don't have an ultimate objective standard of morality, then guess what, man? Your moral principles, your moral values are all subjective, which is based upon morality being relative, which means that morality does not have any objective value. Morality in your worldview is just preferences. So if you're saying that you have different preferences than I do, then guess what? You cannot consistently argue against my position because you don't have an objective standard to argue against my position. Well, one person may have improved a lot more, so the standard could be improvement, as in standards could be selected. No, I disagree that a standard could be improvement, because to say that something has improved is to presuppose, again, a standard. What are you improving to? What are you improving to? When I run track and I get faster, aren't I improving on my speed? And what is the standard? What's the standard? Probably running 100 meters in 9 seconds or 10 seconds. There's a goal. There's a standard to reach. Anyways, let me see who this person is requesting to come up. Timothy. Let's see what Timothy has to say. It's a guy with a guitar, probably a musician. Let's see what he has to say. I've been on here for almost 2 hours. I'm going to get off after Timothy. What's going on, man?
What's up, buddy? Just looking at your backdrop here, and I only cut the last little bit of what you were saying. I apologize. My audio is horrible, by the way.
Actually, it's not. It's actually pretty good.
All right, cool. So yeah, I mean, I'm just about the morality thing. You can go in circles on morality so easily, but you're saying you have the objective standard. I mean, to me, it just sounds like an assertion of it being objective. So if I were to be like, I take the conglomerate of all my moral beliefs and like that is the objective standard. Now we both have two objective standards butting against each other.
Have you in your reading in philosophy, have you ever heard of divine command theory?
Yes.
All right. So in my reading into that, the only problem that divine command theory has is whether or not we have access to God's law. But conceptually, divine command theory gives the religious a basis for saying that their morality is objective and that God gives moral standards to people. And because it's God who gives them, they are objectively applicable to every human being. And it is independent of every human being. So just conceptually, in my worldview, using divine command theory, the only problem I would have would be to justify to another religious person if my law of God is the right law. But
right. And then
but objectively, but both of us would have a framework and grounding for objective morality. It wouldn't just be an assertion. It would actually be based upon something, and in the conceptual framework, it would justify objective morality being true or being real, right? If you disagree,
I feel like that just kicks the can down the road because now you have a God who is telling you things to do, and you're saying it is correct to do because God is telling you to.
Not necessarily.
What is God appealing to when He's making these, it's describing these morals, or is it because He said it that it is now moral? So
wow. Yeah, you're a smart dude, Timothy. You're a smart dude. You're throwing the Euthyphro dilemma at me. Okay, I get it. You probably
less wise words.
You probably asked that question multiple times. Wow. Okay, so it's a good thing that I read into that years ago to have an answer. See, the Euthyphro dilemma, if I remember it correctly, is the question: is God saying something is wrong because it's wrong, or is God saying something is wrong and then it becomes wrong? Which would both of which would point to a standard outside of God dictating what God says is wrong or right? Yo, bro, when I was first introduced to that, I was like, wow, that is a very, very real dilemma. Because either direction you go, it is undesired. So the answer to that I would give is that it is a false dilemma and the false dichotomy, because there's a third option that could be added, and it is this. God says that something is wrong or right because it is accurately representing His nature, which is eternal and not external to Himself and to His being.
And if He, and can God choose to go against that nature? Can He do like an immoral act, or tell someone to do an immoral act?
Yes, he can tell someone to do an immoral act, but he can't go against His nature.
And if the moral actions are intrinsic to Him, part of His nature, how is He defying His own nature to ascribe immoral actions to people?
No, I said that He's not defying. Did you say defying or defining?
I said defying because you said He can tell, He can. So He can't. Can He be immoral? I guess would be an easier way to say. Can God do immoral actions?
Actually, no. Let me tell you why. There's this word called exceptionalism, and it's actually something that we can observe in reality. I mean, the president can, do things that would be deemed immoral and, prosecutionary, if that's even a word, that would be prosecutionary to ordinary citizens of the United States, but not prosecutionary for the president, because he is in a position that makes him the exception. God, in that sense, I would have to, use an example from the world so that we can both have, something to map it onto. God, in that sense, would be in the exceptional position in that he gives laws to human beings that are only applicable to human beings, but are based ultimately in his nature, in that those laws are eternal and they are not based upon anything external to him. And when I say they're based in his nature, I mean they're based in his perfect character.
Okay,
and when
so
I say wait,
something
very quickly.
sorry.
When I say God commands, God can, command someone to break his law. When I say that, I mean that those laws only apply to humans, and only humans can break those laws. So God can't break his own law because they were never applied to him in the first place. But go ahead. I'm sorry I cut you off.
So yeah, but those laws, we just said those came from the intrinsic nature of God. But now you just expanded the intrinsic nature of God not to be just those morals. You expanded it to be all possible options because he's not restricted by those laws. So now we have an arbitrary parsoning, like a parsoning of laws that he's ascribing to humans. Because you just said he can't. If he's immoral, it's not immoral. It's he's allowed to do all these things. So now we don't have just the moral actions. We have literally all actions as part of his nature. So now we have to ask, if the morals come from his nature, and his nature is all possible actions, how are we arbitrarily choosing what the correct ones are that he's giving to us as laws?
No, I would disagree that his nature is all possible actions. I would say that where actions are concerned, actions that take place in time are expressions of the will of God. And in his will, he has decreed and ordained that people break his law for a purpose, and that purpose is to bring about justice and glorify himself in the end. I wouldn't say that all possible actions, because all possible actions would also include actions that God has not willed to take place. That would be a possible action, but no action takes place that is outside of God's will and God's decree. As a Calvinist, I believe that everything that happens is determined by God, including evil and wickedness.
Do you believe in free will?
No, it doesn't exist.
Okay, so this is all just like a movie playing out.
Well, I would say a story.
Okay. And
you cannot do anything. You cannot do anything different than what God has decreed that you do. You are determined by God. The alternative is to say that you are determined by natural laws, which is worse than my position. Because there is no ultimate meaning in that worldview. There's no purpose. It's nothing. But I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that that's your belief.
I feel like
that'd
be like me setting up a bunch of a bunch of toys and making like a stop motion film, and they're all doing things, and then afterward being like, these half of things that happened are this word, and these half of things that happened are this word. And it's like, why would I take the time to arbitrarily assign these two words to these two different sets of actions when no one had a choice in any of it? None of them were even aware of any of it, because it was all just my design. I just moved all the pieces myself.
Before I respond to that, I want to know what your position on that is. Are you a determinist? Atheist?
I'm an agnostic. I know it's boring. And probably leaning toward determinist.
Okay. I just wanted to know, because if you are a determinist, every argument that you pose against my determinism as a Calvinist or determinist if it is geared at refuting my position, you're also refuting your position as a determinist. You know that, right?
Not if we're talking about morals that you're saying are real, and I'm saying I would say in the deterministic world, morals really only apply insofar as you're taking people out of society who are going to hurt people.
Wait, what?
Jailing people.
Wait. Morals only apply so far as you are taking people out of society who hurt other people?
Yeah, I'm kind of just preempting an argument. So, like, if you say moral deterministic, then you can say, how can you blame people who commit crime,
right,
and put them in jail? And you say, well, you put them in jail because they still cause and effect that I believe in.
But you would say that those cause and effects
technically didn't have control.
But you would say that the person who did the deed or did the act, the evil, and then was thrown into prison, and the people who threw that person into prison, all of those actions, the people who prosecuted the person, and the people who did the person who did the evil action, all of them are determined by physical, natural laws, which are all ultimately physical effects.
Yes.
And to ascribe moral values to physical effects would be equivalent to me saying that a tornado is evil and a earthquake is evil because it unalived 10 people.
Yeah, I would. I mean, we'd use those words like more colloquially.
But if you and I ascribe moral values to impersonal entities like natural phenomena that came about because of natural effects or physical effects, like tornadoes and earthquakes that unalive people all the time, or most of the time, if I say, man, that earthquake was evil because of what it did, that would be, a nonsensical statement. But if I say that man was evil because of what he did, then that would be a logical statement. But both of them, if they are just physical effects, wouldn't both of them be illogical statements to make if, it's just physical effects in your worldview?
Yeah, you're right. It's just...
Okay, let me tell you why. Let me tell you why in my worldview that's not the same. Let me just, because I am aware. I'm very aware. And by the way, if I was an atheist, I would have been a determinist like you. Trust me, I would, because there's no way of looking at this world and saying that free will exists. There's no way. Everything that we do, Timothy, is the result of some
illusion. Very convincing illusion.
Everything that we do, bro, is because of something else. Something caused us to do everything that we do. If I was an atheist, I would be a determinist too. So I can sympathize with empathize with the position. So let me tell you why in my worldview I think, and you can disagree with me, but I have to just tell you why I think that my worldview at least makes sense to me. So in my worldview, God decrees all things that take place in time, and the only logical and consistent analogy that I can put onto the relationship of God and reality is a storybook. The same way an author would write a story and the characters have identity, the characters have personality, the characters have laws that they follow, is the same way to an extent that existence and reality has those qualities because God is the author of reality and of existence itself. So when God decrees that I do an evil action, he does so for his ultimate glory, and that gives my evil action a purpose and a meaning. Because in the end, God will judge that evil action that he has decreed that I do. I am just an expression of God's glory. I'm just an expression of God's means to his glory. And this is in Romans chapter 9. If you read the Bible, it's Romans chapter 9. God has made vessels of honor and vessels of dishonor, both of which will glorify him in the end, in that vessels of honor will go to heaven to glorify God in his grace, and vessels of dishonor will go to hell to glorify him in his grace. And he has not only decreed the ends, but also the means to the ends, in that God has decreed my actions that will lead me to hell and my actions that will lead me to heaven, all of which glorify him in the end. And those involve God using his law as a means to judge those who break his law by his decree. We're all determined, but in my worldview, there is a purpose, there is meaning, and there is ultimate design and intentionality from the being and the entity that grounds all of these things the way they are as he controls them and actualizes them. I know that's a mouthful, but I think that...
Well, yeah, but how do we make sense of like the 10 Commandments within that? It's like, here's all the players on the board. Here's everything that's going to happen, already set in stone. Mm-hmm. That being said, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. Even though everything's already set in stone, everything's going to happen. And now, after everything's set in stone, hey, don't do this. I don't know how to make sense.
Well, let me tell you. So everything is set in stone. Everything is set. Everything is made to happen the way it's going to happen. And a part of how things are going to happen is God giving the 10 Commandments and ordaining and decreeing that people break those commandments so that he will glorify himself in the end by punishing those people in hell. So the 10 Commandments are involved in the story. They're in the story, and the story makes sense because the story has meaning, it has purpose, it has intention. But without God, if I was an atheist, I'd be a determinist. There is no ultimate meaning. Everything is just a physical effect. And to even mention that I did an evil action is just me saying that a physical effect is an evil action. But that's nonsense, you know? You know, and I'm glad that we can, you know, compare these two worldviews, and you can meet a Christian who's a determinist. You know, a lot of us are out there, man. We don't believe in free will because free will makes Christianity inconsistent. You can't believe that God knows all things and also believe that you are free to choose what you want to do. It's not possible. It's not possible.
I think people have a hard time with the like going to hell part.
And you know what? That is where the doctrine of free will came from. People could not reconcile God sending people to hell before God deciding to send people to hell before they are born. They could not reconcile that with a good God. So let's insert free will in there, so that it's not God who's ultimately deciding these things. It's God reacting to the actions of people's free will and then sending them to hell as a result. But wait a minute. Doesn't God know what you will do with your free will when he gave you his free will? Yes, he does. So if he knows what you will do when he gave you free will, isn't he still ultimately the reason why you chose to do what you did and hence go to hell? It's inescapable. Free will is not some magic wand that takes away your inconsistency as a Christian. If you believe in free will, you're deliberately making yourself inconsistent.
The just world fallacy. People want to believe there's justice.
Oh, no. So in my worldview,
that's not a deal breaker for you. It's just you kind of just accept this, whether I like it or not. This is the reality.
Yeah, this is the reality. You have to accept it. If you're truthful, you cannot look at this universe and conclude that you have free will, because free will is the ability to do otherwise than you did yesterday. You could not have done otherwise. Why
not believe that the ball rolls backward, all just physical, natural things? Or how about this? Do you think God is supernatural?
Yeah, I would say that God is a transcendental being.
When I hear like things like supernatural, do you think have you ever had like a supernatural experience?
Honestly, man, no, I haven't. No.
Do you believe people who say that? I saw this or this experienced this?
I'm skeptical, but with the worldview and foundation that I stand on, I don't have a basis or a grounding for denying the possibility of these people actually telling the truth. I actually can't, because of the worldview that I'm in. If I was an atheist, then I can say these people are lying. But because I'm Christian and I believe that there is a spiritual realm that I call a transcendental realm, if weird things happen, then I can't rule those things out. I'm just saying, honestly, they have never happened to me. Never.
And how are we justifying the existence of a transcendental realm?
The way I justify it is by looking at the facts of universal transcendental principles. And by transcendental, I mean principles that are not dependent upon our mind and our existence for their validity and their existence. In that the principles of mathematics, the principles of logical discourse, the principle of human rights or human value. These are principles. These are principles that I think, and you can disagree with me, that I think that we discover because they are aspects of reality, and we discover them.
Like God abides by these laws. So if God can't be God and not God at the same time.
Right. I would say that
logic pre-exists.
I would say that logic
create the law. God can't create the law that he can't exist and exist at the same time. He can't create that logical law.
No, and I'm not making that claim. If you look at any literature on this as it relates to God, God's relationship to logic is that logic is an expression of God's nature and God's character, and therefore we can observe instances of logic and logical discourse because it comes from a transcendental being that is characteristically logical, rational, and conscious. And that is why we can find consciousness, rationality, and logic as, expressions of this ultimate unifying first causal principle. But if I remove God as the ultimate unifying first causal principle, I'm just saying, man, honestly, I don't see where I can ground these things that I experience in the world and in time. And that is why ultimately I think, to an extent, that is why I'm not an atheist, because as an atheist, I don't see where I could ground these things as being real and being actual and being,
Come on over
consistent.
to the agnostic side.
Yeah, yeah, because you guys just say you don't know. You guys just you don't know, and you guys are very honest.
We have these discussions and about it, and we're okay with that.
I mean, you guys say you don't know, and I love you guys for that. I think that I have to admit and confess that I have my cognitive bias, and it is due to how I was raised and where I was raised, and these are things that I hold dear, and I think it's largely due to how I was raised. I was raised in a Christian home. I mean, well, not strictly, but I'm from Jamaica, and Jamaica is a Christian country, so I can't say that did not play a part at all in my position.
Well, we're agreeing that there's this logical principle that God could not have created, and it's like almost like anything that we can find that doesn't seem creatable, we're going to say that's God's expressing it through his nature. But that seems a little bit like we're just hand-waving it to me. Like, I feel like we both agree at that point when you're saying that we have found something, we agree that it could not have been created. And if we have that set of things, then why not just remove this God character, or maybe think of it as a more amorphous philosophical concept as opposed to a concrete God?
Let me tell you why.
It's a physical, natural reality.
Let me tell you why. To me at least, this is why I can't remove God from the equation. The reason why I can't remove God from the equation is because if I remove God from the equation, then I am left with the world exemplifying and being emblematic of design, order, and disorder, and emblematic of instances of consciousness, rationality, and logical discourse coming from a source that is characteristically non-rational, non-conscious, and non-logical. I would have to, like, to me, it is insufficient to say, these things just are. These things just is. It is insufficient for me to just accept that. I have to have a grounding. There has to be a grounding. There has to be something that has these qualities that these instances of rationality, consciousness, and logical discourse are derived from and are sustained and controlled by. There has to be something more. Because if there isn't...
In the grand scheme of things, you'd be right. In the grand scheme of things, there'd be this kind of disorder, and that's the source. But then you think of how they talk about entropy. Like, how can we have this organized world that we live in when entropy is supposed to be increasing? And it's like, well, that's because we're in a pocket of dysentropy. We're in a pocket or an offshoot where, yeah, entropy is not increasing right here or stagnating, but the overall entropy of reality and of our universe or multiverse, whatever, is overall increasing, and that allows for these pockets to exist where we could look around. In our view, all we see is like organization for the most part. We can see chaos out in the fringes of space, whatever, maybe. But when we're saying how can this order come from disorder, it's because we're a pocket of order. The overall disorder is increasing, and the homogeneity is increasing.
And I'm not making the argument that we are in an ordered universe and that's all we have. What I'm saying is that there is order and disorder, and as you well know, the is it the third law or second law of thermodynamics, entropies, we're all headed to disorder. We are headed to disorder from order, so it's from order to disorder. But we haven't gotten to complete disorder yet. There's still order, but we're headed to disorder. And I'm saying that this order came from something that is characteristically intentional in its creating. And I can't say that it's a natural thing that is characteristically none of these things that we see expressed in the universe. Because I would have to then explain, how did something that is non-rational, non-conscious, and non-logical produce instances of rationality, consciousness, and logic when we cannot see that reproduced in a lab anywhere? I don't think we will ever see that either. But how can I be consistent in my worldview as an atheist or as an agnostic who believes that science is the ultimate means by which I know truth, and then say, even though I don't have anything in science that can tell me how these things are, I just believe that they are? I think that's a cop-out. Yeah. I'm just sharing with you my perspective. And you don't have to, adopt it. I'm just saying this is why I am not an atheist. I think I think to some extent it is
a source of order.
It is just to deny God's existence because I want to live the way I want to live. As a matter of fact, if I was an atheist, I would be a hedonist. I would think that hedonism is the means of morality. Maximizing happiness for the individual is what is right, even if it compromising somebody else's happiness. As long as you're happy, you're living life, you're living purpose. Because guess what? After you're gone, that's it. So you might as well live and be happy and enjoy your life. Do whatever you want to do with whoever you want to do it with, because after it's all over, it's done. It's meaningless. So make your own meaning, create your own meaning, live the way you want to live, and enjoy life because it's all fleeting, it's all nihilistic, and there's nothing after. But I'm not an atheist. I think that there's meaning in this life, and this meaning comes from this ultimate unifying first causal principle that actualizes, sustains, and controls existence. And mark that word, controls existence. Because if it's controlled, then it has purpose, it has intentionality. And it's given purpose and intentionality from this ultimate unifying first causal principle, and that's God. And that gives me meaning, in that this life is not all that's there. After I'm gone, there's something more, and I can live with purpose. I can live with meaning, knowing that there's something more. Something is out there. There's something more than just what we see. But if you say you're agnostic and you're open to the possibility of God's existence, but you're not ruling it out, you're just open to it and you're just being passive and you're yet to be convinced, but you're open to being convinced. I mean, bro, that's fine. At least you're open.
Yeah. But if have you ever heard of Boltzmann brain theory?
Boltzmann brain theory? No, I haven't. No.
That's like, you can think of an infinite universe, and you can think of particles colliding into each other, whatever, forming every possible thing they can form. If you take an infinite universe and particles infinitely combining, the idea is that you would just, anything conceivable that they could create, they would create at some point in time. And if you disagree, you're just understating how long infinity really is. So
is that like a model? Is that like a model in the scientific community?
Kind of. So it was kind of proposed just based on those two principles. Particles exist, and a lot of people think the universe is infinite or near infinite. You put those two together, and you end up with weird conclusions like
multiverse.
Yeah, we end up with weird things. So things like you exist with a brain, right?
Yeah.
But technically, a more simple mind would be just a brain. Just take your brain right now, the organization of particles that are currently making up your exact brain state, and if I were to recreate that right next to you, that would have the same thoughts and feelings and whatever that you currently have. And it exists without a body or evolution or billions of years of a world having it, all that would have to go away. It would just be there. It would just be particles that happen to form in those positions.
Yeah, if I'm honest, I would have to say that all of those things are possible in a multiverse scenario, in an infinite universe sanario.
Right.
Of course, it's possible. Those things are possible. I guess I would just have to ask: are those things factual?
It'd have to happen. It would have to happen in that scenario if that's true. And the way current physicists think of it is like, okay, this does seem to be like the conclusion of where we are right now with our models of physics. We don't like it. We don't like that conclusion, and therefore, because we don't like that conclusion, that it's literally more likely that we're all just brains in a space that are popping in and out of existence, as opposed to real humans who evolved. We don't like that. Therefore, there's something wrong with our theories. So a lot of physicists don't take it super seriously. They don't believe it. It is a current conclusion, though. It is currently a conclusion of their theories, and they're currently wondering, are we doing wrong in our theories that's giving us this weird conclusion that technically we have to accept. It's much more likely that you'd be a blip in existence that's coming in and thinking you're a thing and you're really not, and it going away in 10 seconds later, as opposed to the much more complex universe coming and then existing, and planets coming and black holes and then evolving and billions and billions and billions of years and all other kinds. That's way more complex. Therefore, the more simple combination is more likely. So if you take that seriously, though, since for me it hasn't been disproven yet, I'm just going to entertain the idea. Another combination of particles would be a godlike entity. You can think of yourself, your collection of particles. You can imagine yourself 10 times bigger. That's a collection of particles. Now imagine yourself 1,000,000,000 times bigger. That's a collection of particles. If we're saying that every collection of particles is going to happen eventually, all of these things are going to happen eventually, including, now this wouldn't be a reality creating God, but it could be a God-like entity that could create things within reality. That's about as close as you can get with current physics to a God-like entity. You can't go past that point of creating all of reality, because then that doesn't really make sense. God is a real thing, therefore reality exists. But it's just an interesting thought experiment.
It actually is, man. It actually is. There's a lot of theories out there.
Agnostic.
Yeah, I guess that's a perk. That's a perk of being an agnostic. It's a plus. It's a plus. But I mean, at least you have an open mind, man, and I appreciate this conversation. I've been on here for almost 3 hours. I'm gonna get off and get some food, and maybe we can talk again sometime, Timothy. Thank you so much for being respectful, man, and I'm glad we could have a conversation.
Yeah, dude, peace out.
Peace out, bro. So today was a good day, everybody. I had conversations. I'm on YouTube right now. Wow, only 4 views. Would you look at that? Out of the 200 subscribers I have, I only have 4 views. Whatever. But on here, wow, I only have 5 people on here. Maybe after I end the live, I'll see 400 views. I don't know. Whatever. Guys, my YouTube channel is The Right Perspective. You'll see a picture of my big head, so you'll see me on there. The Right Perspective is a YouTube channel. I think that's it for the day. Or for now. I'll get back on here later on today, of course. I haven't had breakfast yet. I got to go eat something so that I don't pass out, as my brother in Christ said earlier. But it was a good conversation today. I'm glad that we could have these discussions and these conversations respectfully and lovingly. And it shows that, even though we disagree, we can still respect each other. Thank you guys so much for having me by, staying on here and listening to this, knucklehead speak. And see you again soon. Have a good one. God bless you all. Oh, 600 views, eh? 600 views. All right. Guys, I got to go to the bathroom. Got to pee. Been drinking this so long. I'm going to end live here. Oh, damn. So, end stream. End.